with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is.
I was afraid, I didn't know what to do. A lot of us be coming in it.
And what I'll say was amazing to me was
Season 2. Welcome back to the L3 Perspective. My name is Glenn Davis. As you know, I'm sitting here with my co-host, Cameron Macias.
Coach Cam.
L3 Perspective, as you know, we talk about life, love, leadership.
As we've talked about in the past, like, love, share, subscribe. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Because at the end of the day, we do it for you guys.
What's going on, guys? Hey, welcome back to the L3 Perspective, where we talk about life, love, leadership. We're in Season 2. I'm super excited about today's guest, as he's been on Season 1. He's back for Season 2 in person. But as we go, before we even dive into the introduction, I'm going to toss it over to Cam, and then we'll get into it.
So as you guys already know, like, love, share, subscribe. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. At the end of the day, we do it for you guys. So if you don't tell us what you like or how you want this to go, then we really don't know what guests to bring on and what to talk about. So with that being said, we're going to introduce our guest and we're going to get into it, y'all.
Yeah. Before we even get into the intro, Billy Rowe.
Big dog.
Hey,
Billy
man.
Rowe.
So first time in studio, all Season 1 was not pretty much, 98% of it was all virtual.
Yeah.
All right. So this is, we're happy to have you in the studio. Look forward to connecting with you today. But before we dive into our conversation, I just want to read a little bit about Billy Rowe. If you guys didn't check out Season 1 of that episode, make sure you go back and check it. All right, but Billy F. Rowe Jr.'s passion for inspiration runs deep. For the past decade, he has been a thought leader and encouraging everyday people to think more intentionally about the quality of their lives. His book, Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion, great book, by the way, expands upon the gift while approaching further transformation from a perspective of compassion, forgiveness, and confidence. A native of Sacramento, California, with over 2 decades, a native of Sacramento, California, with over 2 decades of experience in retail, recruiting, sales, management, and analytics, author Billy F. Rowe Jr. Has a diverse professional background. As an inspirational speaker and empowerment coach, he has worked with individuals, groups, and companies to help optimize. I knew I liked you.
There's that word, baby.
Optimize productivity and leadership communication. Over the years, Billy has adopted leadership concepts inspired by Stephen Covey, one of my favorites, John Maxwell, Brian Tracy, Les Brown, and other phenomenal inspirational speakers. His advanced comprehension of emotional intelligence, which I hope we dive into today and talk about that, has guided him in creating content that resonates with the heart of the human experience. So there's some more about Billy's bio, but we're going to break it up and I want to dive it into our actual conversation. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Billy F. Rowe Jr.
Let's go. Let's get it.
Yes. Well, Billy, again, man, I know Season 1, we talked about it briefly. I've met you through the connection and relationship to my wife back decades ago, stayed in contact, and now have partnerships together, and things are just getting started, right? So
just getting started. I
yeah,
like that.
just getting started.
Just getting started.
And so we're excited to have you on the L3 Perspective again.
Absolutely.
So thank you for blessing us with your presence.
Love being here.
And Billy's like one of the first supporters.
That is true.
Bang.
Yeah.
Bang.
When you believe, you believe.
Yeah. That is definitely true.
Gang. So, Billy, tell us where it all started, bro.
Where it all started.
Let's start from the gate. So before we get into how dope you are now, let's talk about how nerdy you were then.
Right. It started in Excel. No, it's interesting. This past year, I've really been looking at relationships and how I forge deep relationships with people.
No.
And that started in kindergarten for me. Like, hey, I'm Billy Rowe. Even when I was little, I'm Billy Rowe. That's how I introduced myself. Hey, I'm Billy Rowe. You want to play tag? Hey, I'm Billy Rowe. You want to play basketball? Hey, I'm Billy Rowe. Like, that was always me. This person. Like,
it's like a movie, Billy Rowe.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Billy Rowe, Billy Rowe, Billy Rowe. So that's where it started for me, is in my childhood, understanding that I wanted to forge relationships. But as I've done deep work, I had to figure out where that in and of itself came from. And it came from being in an environment where I was growing up and I didn't necessarily have the safety in my household that I wanted to have. Not that I wasn't like, wasn't that like I was being abused, but there were things that were taking place in my household that
Wouldn't take place in your household now.
yeah, that wouldn't
say
take
that.
place in
Let's
my
say it
yeah,
like
let's
that.
call it like that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't take place in my household now, right?
Mm.
And so as a result, when you are a child and you only really know two places in the world, right? You know your house and you know school. These are the two places that you go, you're predominantly at one or the other.
For sure.
And so when I would be at school, it was like, how do I create relationships with people for them to like me and embrace me and to have other options besides just my family, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward to like high school and after high school, a lot of the relationships that I have even today are from elementary school. And it's like to the point to where I was recently in Southern Oklahoma, and I have a friend who grew up around the corner from me. I haven't seen her since 6th grade because she moved to Oklahoma in 6th grade. But she's like 3 hours away from where I'm at in Southern Oklahoma.
Yeah.
She was like, I will drive to meet you there.
That's crazy.
Mm.
And I haven't seen this person since 6th grade, but because of how I understood how to forge relationships back then, she's like, you're close enough. I'll figure it out.
For sure.
I'll get to you. And so that's where it really started for me, is in trying to find the safety in having multiple relationships, kind of like investments, right?
Yeah.
You don't invest all in hats, because if hats go under, now there go all your investments. You invest in hats, plants, and lamps.
Yeah.
And if one goes under, you still have at least 2 legs to stand that table up on, right?
Yeah.
That's how I look at relationships. Yeah, your family relationship is probably one of your most powerful and important relationships, but you need some other relationships in the event that, you know, sometimes families have their rough patches and they break up for a little bit and come back together. Sometimes they break up and never come back together, right?
For sure.
So you have to figure out how to create stability for yourself. And when you talk about emotional intelligence, you have to create an emotional stability for yourself that isn't reliant upon one investment strategy when it comes to relationship. So that's really where that started at for me, is in that relationship mode from being young to older. And I look at everything that I've done and a lot of the things that I've accomplished, whether it's writing a book or my career or whatever it may be, like purchasing real estate, all of that stuff has been a derivative of relationship.
Right. That's funny that you mentioned and you talk about relationships. Cam and I had a pretty deep conversation right before you came into the studio, was stemmed upon relationships, right? Like they're you know, in those different relationships, you may be having rough patches, right?
Right.
But like I said, but like you said, like having those other legs that are sturdy is able to keep the balance of the table.
Yes.
And so that's I like that.
So with you knowing how to forge relationships, like what was it, you know, middle school, high school, like what did that look like? Because we all grew up around the same time.
Yeah.
So I
different
would,
places, same
different
time.
places, yeah, different places at the same time. And what I would also say is that the fact that you're able to still be in contact with someone from 6th grade, and that was before Facebook, Instagram, all that,
MySpace,
all of that, right? Like that's pretty dope.
Yeah. Call waiting and
Yeah.
call interruption, call the operator. Hey, can you break through us an emergency?
Yeah. So you start out with the relationships piece, but like what did high school look like for you? What did middle school look like for you? You know, you grew up in Sacramento. You obviously you didn't grow up in the best place.
No.
Now it's like
you grew up in
super
the Heights, right?
And
Yeah.
you grew up in the Heights is like super gentrified now, but you know,
Right.
those of us who were there then,
It was not.
It was not.
Yeah, they had to take some buildings down in order
Yeah.
to fix that a little bit. But, you know, what it looked like was being genuine to who I was and giving people that. So, for instance, growing up in the Heights, a lot of people, you know, talk slang, and I could talk slang with the best of them. Don't get that twisted. But there were moments where I was willing to not talk in slang, even when slang would have probably been appropriate.
Yeah,
because I was okay being me.
for sure.
For instance, like smoking weed, right? I'm not big on smoking. If you smoke, great for you, but that's not who I am. And to be true to that in an environment where people are like, hey, do you want to smoke? Hey, do you want to smoke? Hey, do you want to smoke?
Yeah,
Being who you are, it became a point where people would say, hey, Billy, just don't even offer him. Billy doesn't smoke. And it's funny because the person who's smoking weed is like, I want to be considerate that I offer.
Puff, puff, pass.
Right? I mean, you're my guest. I have to give you some. but I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't smoke. And it got to the point where people would see me and even if they were smoking weed around me, they'd be like, yeah, Billy doesn't smoke. Don't even waste your time.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a peer pressure thing. And that was another part of the relationship is because you're getting who I am, you can't pressure me into somebody that I am not.
Yeah.
And that was elementary, that was junior high. And I would say one of the pivotal moments for me was in elementary school. From 1st to 3rd grade, I had a lot of temper tantrums. And I mean, like, tear your clothes, temper tantrums.
You're getting it?
Right, I was getting it. I mean, and you got to be pretty strong to tear some corduroy pants. I just want to be very clear.
Hella strong.
So, but I had a lot of temper tantrums, and by the time I got to 3rd grade, I remember them calling a meeting with my parents, and they were like, "Hey, Billy is having some of these issues because he's extremely bright and he's ahead of a lot of his peers in the class, so he has a lot of extra time to just be disruptive, right?" And they asked me at that point, "Hey, do you want to go to GATE? Do you want to go to a different elementary school with kids who are in a different program called GATE, Gifted and Talented Education, which was, I think, STEM now."
They still have GATE program.
Oh, they do? Okay. But I was like, no, I want to stay here with my friends.
Yeah.
Because I understood the importance of the relationship. Whereas a lot of parents, especially back in our day, they're like, you ain't even going to know these people when you get older.
Correct. They'd be like, why are you tripping?
Don't worry about it because you're not even going to know half of these people. And they're right. You don't know half of them. I don't have like half of the relationships.
And you
from
shouldn't. I
elementary
mean,
school.
like, then at that point, you can't manage.
Right. That's too many relationships. But the people that were important to me were important for me to stay around. And so staying around them until 6th grade was up, then going to junior high, then they put me in GATE because GATE was in the school. So I then shifted away from some of those friends and started hanging out with kids who were kind of at the advanced level of education that I was at.
Yeah.
And in that too was still a challenge because I'm this little hood kid, right? Coming from the hood. And you have some of these kids, they're in a hood school too, but they might have a different dynamic in their house than I have in my house. And so it became a competition for me of proving who I was. Like, there's the imposter syndrome of, do I really know what I know?
Yeah.
And then there's the, I know what I know, but they don't believe that I know it. So now I got to prove it. And so I was constantly competing with all the students. It was like, you got 100%, I got 100%. You got 100%, I got 101%. I did the extra credit.
The teacher told me she liked me. She just said, good job to you.
So that's what junior high looked like. And then high school, as that friend diaspora changes, you begin to see people doing their new own thing. And so though high school was still forged in relationships, you couldn't talk to somebody in my high school campus who didn't know who I was, but I wasn't like the popular athlete quarterback or anything like that.
Sure.
It was just like, oh yeah, the popular running back, he knew who I was.
Yeah.
The popular quarterback, he knew who I was, but it was like I had my own thing going on.
For sure.
And I understood expanding. I think high school is where I began to understand the expansion beyond the walls of your school.
Yeah.
And that's where I started meeting people, like in the summer school programs when all the schools come together. Now I'm meeting people and then those people go back out, but then I keep some of those relationships. So it's expanding my influence.
For sure.
And that's what it overall came down to, was understanding that influence, that scope of my influence at a broader scale.
Yeah.
Interesting. So author, like, not everyone thinks about becoming an author.
True.
And so, like, was there a pivotal shift in your mindset or your thought process that sparked the thought, like, hey, I want to produce a book? And if so, if you could share part of that, and if not, like, what was it that sparked the thought, like, I'm going to publish a book?
Yeah, there was definitely a thought of publishing a book. number one, my brother's an author, right? So
Yeah.
dealing with
A
my
hella
brother,
author.
right? He's like, okay, he's like 5 books
Shout
in,
out,
I'm
baby.
like 1 book in, right? So there's that. I think sometimes seeing things, especially when they're in that close of proximity to you, it helps generate your own vision.
Mhm.
But the other part of that was, as you guys know, I'm big on legacy. And what am I going to leave behind in this world, right? And sometimes when we think about books, we think about them as a product, right? But I also think about that old, elementary school project where you do the time capsule and you put all these cassette tapes and, gigapets and Tiger Electronics in the capsule and you bury them for
Freaking
50 years.
Freaking gigapets, man. I was trying to explain what Tamagotchi. What a Tamagotchi was the arrow the other day. He said, "What is that?" I was like a digital pet. He's like,
Yeah.
"So, like, do you feed it?" Like,
If you don't, it dies.
it dies. He's like, "Well, so what's the point?" And I was like, "You just see who can keep their digital animal alive the longest, or you just forget about it."
Yeah, or the batteries die.
And then it dies.
Or the batteries die.
Either way, it dies.
Either way, you lose eventually. Teaches you about loss.
Yeah, loss. It's a grief counseling
But
tool.
that's for me, like what I look at as the book is that time capsule to insight into what my thoughts were, what my intelligence level was at this point. Because the fortunate thing about having that is I'll be able to now go back and read that book at 10 years from now, right? And say, oh, I had that part right. And I see how I've expanded upon it. Oh, I had that part a little off, but I see the corrections that I made. Oh, I had that part right, and now I'm getting it wrong. I need to get back to right. Like that's where the concept of the book came. And I love conversation and dialogue with people, but I'm not big on having the same conversation over and over again. And so as a result, by writing the book, it takes a lot of the things, a lot of my beliefs, a lot of the tools that I use personally, it takes them and puts them in a capsule that other people can ingest without me having to continue to repeat it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So
Speaking about legacy, so you put on a men's conference in Sacramento, California.
yeah, that was fun.
And it was a fun.
It was
That was
aight.
actually, I think that was my very first men's conference. What'd you say?
I say it was all right.
It was all right. It did sound.
It did.
Yeah, it was really. Do you often think about that event when you put it on, and then do you plan on putting on another men's conference?
Yeah, I do think about that. I think about a lot of things, but I do think about that event in regards to how it was brought together, the intention behind it, how it was focused, and then it literally stemmed from a conversation you and I had. Like,
Oh yeah, that's right.
we were just randomly meeting every Friday for a while, and we had this conversation, and I was like, I want to put on this conference. And you said something, and the word legacy came up in that conversation. I was like, yeah, that's where
TCG,
we're
there you
going.
go.
That's where we're going with
That's
this.
what I do in people's lives.
There you go.
I'm just kidding.
I'm an optimist prime.
He's the guy. He's the guy.
I have the arc of leadership.
Gotcha.
But that for me, when I look back at that event, it sometimes feels like it's an unreal event for me, right? Here I am again. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, and it's like I have a passion and a heart for men, and here I am just doing without knowing exactly where every brick is going to be when I'm coming up with the process, but just laying those bricks. So I do have, like, being on this past trip that I went to in southern Oklahoma, it was 13 men in this cabin, right? And it
That's a lot of
immediately,
dudes.
it immediately brought back to me, I want there to be a retreat for men to go on.
Yeah.
But the way I see that retreat is like, there's a therapist there for us to talk to. So like telling you about the emotions I was dealing with my godfather, right? As I'm going through those emotions, some of that is just too much for me to handle in the moment because life is so busy. But to slow down and be in a retreat environment where it's like, hey, look, I'm still suffering from the loss of my godfather.
Yeah.
I think that is a good place to have that therapeutic conversation and start kind of getting, I call it blacksmithing, the tools that are going to be needed to help me in those moments where I do struggle with it, because I don't see it going anywhere. I love the man. So it's not, the love is not going to go anywhere. So I have to figure out what tools I can use to kind of help me cope with the fact that he's gone. Right. So I do see there being other conferences and other retreats. And one of the things that I'm doing this year is to kind of get what that vision looks like at a grander scale is I'm going to Afrotech, right?
Yeah.
Going to be there for 5 days at a huge conference for tech. But I'm going there because number one, I want to network. I want to expand that influence through relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
But number two, I want to see what in that template would work for what I can kind of see in my mind and help bring clarity to my vision.
So the book, what is it? Fire your job, hire your passion.
Yep.
Let's unravel that. Like, how did you come up with it? What season of your life were you in that you came? Because that's like, you know, if I tell you first glance, when I hear it, I'm like, oh, this dude fucking hated his job in this moment. Like, he was like, all he could think about was what else could he be doing?
Yeah.
Well, that's just what I personally like see or hear in my head when I see the title of that book. But like, you know, what is it about? And then like, what led you to that specific subject? Because you talked about legacy, but it's like, why was that the first thing that you decided to write that was in conjunction with your legacy?
So
that was a good ass question, by the way.
that was a great question. But that fire your job, hire your passion wasn't the first original book I was going to write.
Okay.
The first original book I was going to write was actually called The Walk of Becoming a Man of God. And it was not so much in the religious standpoint, but in the challenges of trying to like live what is the quote unquote righteous life, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of my imposter syndrome in that of like, well, I'm not perfect, and at times I can be hypocritical. Made me like, I don't want to do this book because somebody's gonna try to be like, well, you didn't do this on this day, and
who are
and
you
then they're gonna
then?
find the other hypocritical hands that I got. So,
But that made it so hypocritical. You feel me?
right? Nobody asked you. So I moved away from that book, and then you're right. I was in this space in my life where I was discovering who Billy was as the inspirational coach, right? As I refer to myself as Coach Rowe, right?
Yeah.
I was discovering who Coach Rowe was.
Yeah.
And so I was in this space where I'm a high school graduate. I have a job that is paying me way more than what statistically says I'm supposed to be making, but I'm not happy with this role because of the leader in which I was under at the time.
Yep. It's always them leaders, man.
Yeah, leaders are very crucial.
The managers,
bosses, managers, whatever.
Glenn's always been bossing me around.
Yeah, they're annoying. But I was in this space where I was really, when they say midlife crisis, I probably was in my midlife crisis. I was like questioning the relationship I was in. I was questioning the work that I did. I was questioning, did I want to even go into the office anymore? And I got to a point to where I had to choose me. So when people see that title, Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion, it's, quit your job and go and make money with your passion, right? That's their thought process. But the reality is it's more so about firing distractions, things that are keeping you away from your passion, and then hiring influence to the things that you're passionate on. So the only way that I've been able to get influence in the things that I'm passionate on is by acting on them, right? Acting on those things I'm passionate.
Yeah, making them a priority.
Yeah, but if you don't do that and you're like, oh, well, I gotta go and do this after work, and I gotta do this, and I gotta go to work and do that, and I gotta make it look like I'm a good employee, so I gotta stay 2 hours after work is over just to show some FaceTime. Those things don't really align well with somebody who's trying to be passionate about something. Because if you're trying to be passionate about something, right, what you end up doing inevitably is saying, okay, I finished the task that I had to do. I had to get work done. I'm off at 5. Let me go and run. If I'm a personal trainer, let me run to the gym and go and practice some workouts, right? If I'm a basketball player, let me run to the basketball court and shoot some shots. If I'm a golfer, let me go to the driving range and chip some balls, or whatever it may be, right? You're constantly trying to rush to the passion part after you do the mandatory stuff. With Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion, I literally approached it from the perspective of layoffs, interviews, and now hiring. That's the 3 sections in the books. The layoffs are the the things that you need to get rid of. And the first thing that I told people in that book to get rid of is, hey, you might want to get rid of living outside of your means, because that's going to drive a lot of your other activities.
Get that budget in check,
If
daddy.
you don't have a good budget and your budget is running negative, at some point your budget is going to be the priority of your life.
Right.
It don't matter if your kid is in the hospital. It doesn't matter if you're missing perfect attendance awards, honor roll awards. None of that stuff matters, because you have to make ends meet.
Right.
And unfortunately, your mind will trick you to thinking that that's the priority.
Yeah,
When
and
it-
that's like one of the biggest things in America right now.
Yeah.
That's what causes stress. The
Yes.
biggest thing that causes stress is financial stress.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I actually, when I was younger, I used to get pulled over because I'd be speeding or whatever, right?
No way.
Yeah, or just pulled over or whatever. But I remember like the angst that I had
Mhm.
when I'd get pulled over, because here I am, working at Blockbuster Video, making $6.10 an hour.
Yeah.
So if you give me a $60 ticket, that's 10 hours of work,
Right.
and it's more because I got to pay taxes, right?
Damn, he dropped the blockbuster on.
Yeah, make it a Blockbuster, right?
Ew.
So
I see why you guys vibe with each other. Yeah, I'm sorry.
We get along.
so in that, I fast forward to like my adulthood, where I'm a much more financially stable individual, and if a cop pulls me over, I don't have that angst anymore, right? I'm like, yo, I'm gonna just roll my windows down so you can see in this car, because I don't want no problems. And if you write me a ticket, you write me a ticket, and then I pay the ticket and I go to traffic school to hopefully not have it on my record.
Right.
Like, that's now the space that I'm in.
Mhm.
But in starting with Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion, that's why I started with layoff, things that you kind of need to get out of your life, those distractions that you need to
Yeah.
get out of your life
Mhm.
before you start actually looking at interviewing, which is the next section of the book, interviewing things that you might be passionate about, or figuring out how to discover what you're passionate about.
Mhm.
So I was, in many ways, like you said, I was frustrated with my job.
Yeah.
But overall, the book itself was, what do they call it in the movies? Like a becoming of age
Mm.
story. It was like a
Yeah.
becoming of age story for me to understand how I have moved from being like, man, I got this job, I'm making good money, I better, fall in line, to like, hey, you know what? There's other good jobs out there.
Yeah.
Regardless if you graduated just from high school, you have a skill set, and
People want me.
you're competent. Yeah, you're competent. You have a skill set, and people are looking for people like you for their company.
For sure.
So that's how I came to that. But it really comes down to firing distractions, and I would say more so hiring focus.
Mm. What are some tips that you share with people you've coached on how they can fire their distractions, right? Because especially now, there's so many distractions. When you turn to your left, your right, you look forward.
Hella distraction.
When you're sleeping, like all of that. Like, what are some tips, some practical tips that have either worked for you or that you share with some of your clients regarding firing distractions?
Yeah, I think issue identification is one of the biggest ones that I've given, and not just the identification of the issue, but identifying that there is an issue, right?
Mm.
And from that, I can't remember where I got this exercise from, but there's this 5-second countdown exercise in which, once you identify, like, let's say I'm working on writing an essay, and then I find myself scrolling on Instagram, right? Once I recognize I'm scrolling on Instagram, I then say, you got 5 seconds to get off. 5, 4. Like, immediately
Yeah.
start that timer.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's like, shut down, phones down, back to my focus, right? Same thing I do in my workouts when I'm like, I'm bench pressing, I'm tired, and I'm like, dang, I really don't want to do another set. You got 5 seconds, 4, 3, and I'm putting my hands on the bar, 2, 1, lift off.
Mm.
And so what that does is it interrupts your ability to make excuses, because number one, you're counting, right? Which you're going to be focused on that. I'm not going to be like 5. Well, what about the day that I did
Right.
5, 4, and I know when I get to 1, I need to be actively doing what it is I'm moving to do.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, when I say issue identification, whether you identify what the issue is or not, once you realize there's an issue, you start that timer for action,
Mm.
and then you immediately jump into action. It is something that has made getting up out of the bed, because it's easy to be in your bed for 2-3 hours after you're up. If you're scrolling on social media, it's something that makes getting out of your bed easier. It's something that also can make when you're in like an argument easier. Hey, where they say count to 3.
Mhm.
Hey,
I need all 5.
Well, whoop that ass.
it makes it where it's like, okay, I identified that this is not going anywhere. You got 5 seconds to end this conversation because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, I need to take a break.
I like that because it goes to, we talk about making choices in our life,
No.
right? And it goes to like, hey, I have these things I need to accomplish or want to accomplish. I get distracted. I do the 5-second. I have the choice to either keep scrolling or keep doing the thing that's distracting me, or make the choice to actually accomplish the thing that will get me closer to my goal.
Yeah.
Yep.
I never. It's crazy how like something so small could be so impactful.
Yeah.
And you being the thing that, or the thing that stands in the way of you accomplishing that thing or not accomplishing it.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Or
5
taking
seconds. It's
longer.
5 seconds.
Right. It just
That's
takes 5
crazy.
seconds. Then the compound interest of the 5-second decision that you've made. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Hopefully, folks wrote that down.
Yeah. So one of the things I just started doing was like for phase 1 is I have to be off all electronics by 9 o'clock at night.
Ooh.
But what I also did was I put things on the list that require me to be on the electronics. So like I have to knowingly get those things done,
Right.
or else I will go back.
Shoot.
You know, and it's like phones down, no electronics. I originally I was like, oh, my phone, and I was like, nope, I want to get more sleep.
Right.
I want to spend more time with my wife at night before we go to bed. Like, I just don't want to be attached to my phone. Like,
Right.
I want to have some self-control as far as that's concerned. So I get that.
I have a question for you. So because that takes
No.
a lot of will, desire, it takes a lot of. And it boils down to accountability,
Yeah.
right? So how do you hold yourself accountable to stick to that? Not even accountable. Like, how do you stay consistent at that?
I mean,
In making those. So you, for example, like 9 o'clock, phones off, technology, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. Like you're constantly putting these goals in front of you.
mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that you do to stay consistent so that you are accomplishing things?
Telling everybody else I got to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we did 75 hard and that was cool, but it was like, and it was cool that my wife and my son did it, but they created a barrier in certain arenas because it's like, oh, we want to work out with you, or like I had to we're reminding and doing all these things. So when I moved to phase 1, I was like, you guys aren't involved, and
Right.
if you are, I don't want nothing. I don't want anything to do with it. And so part of that too is like, like the other day when my wife got home, I was like, all right, I got to go for my walk. You coming? She's like, nope. I was like, see you later.
Yep.
Like, bye. Like last night I had to do some stuff for a client of ours, as well as like I have to look at my time. I have like timers set that's like, hey, it's 7:30. Okay, that means I have an hour and a half. Have I done the things on electronics that I said I was gonna do? Well, like, hey, 20 minutes or 10 pages of reading is a part of it, but that doesn't require an electronic.
Right.
So I keep that either early in the day, or that's one of the last things I do, right? Taking a picture. Oh, shit, that requires me to be on my phone. So I need to make sure I take a picture earlier before 9 o'clock. So it's like, but the I would say the timers help.
Gotcha.
And then also like Net knows. She's like, oh, it's 8:45. You
Mhm.
do all the stuff you gotta do. So it's like also having someone that's like willing to inadvertently hold you accountable. I didn't ask her to do any of that. It's just, but she knows that's important to me, and she knows that she's gonna support in the ways that she can support.
Those accountability.
It's
partners.
It's the partners, right? Like, like they like her and Arrow went and got some like sweets. She didn't say anything to me, but my son for sure took a picture of it and sent it to me. It was like, ooh, Nutella turnover, so good. And she was like, I wasn't even gonna say nothing to you because I know you can't eat that. But our son's kind of a,
Right.
can't control that. But it's like accountability, same thing with you and I. When I'm like, hey, I want to do this, but like we need to do this together.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, I asked because we were on the topic of distractions, right? And
Mhm.
with so many challenges, especially as men, right? And leaders,
Yeah.
it's, I think it's important to communicate these practical principles that actually work for us,
Right.
because a lot of people are struggling, like where do I even start?
Yeah. But honesty, I think, is where you start.
Mm,
Like Billy said, acknowledging that there's a problem.
right.
I acknowledge that me being on my phone past 9 o'clock was a problem.
Mm.
And it wasn't for anything productive.
Right.
I was
Right.
scrolling on Instagram or on Facebook, and every once in a while, I was posting a video of the pod, whatever. But like, that was like maybe 10% of the time. The rest of it, I was just BSing, and then, I was noticing that my dreams were getting funky because like we're also like watching vampire shows right before bed, 'cause we're, like, stuff like that. So it's like acknowledging like, hey, electronics really like are not good, right before. So like I need to acknowledge that I have a problem doing that. It's the same thing with 75 Hard. I acknowledge that I have a problem with self-control of food. So by putting something in place that controls what food I can or can't eat, and I'm the one that chose the food. That's the thing. It wasn't like, hey, you got to be to this diet. It was like, no,
Right.
you pick
diet.
You pick a diet, whatever you want to stick to, and you have to stick to it. So I chose, lower carb, no sugar, because those are the things I have a problem with. Because I was able to be honest that I have a problem with those things.
Honesty.
Yep.
Honesty.
So
Huge.
next,
Yes.
next, like, what was the next chapter? What's the next chapter?
Oh,
So it was interviewing.
interviewing.
So
So,
interviewing
you got your layoffs, you got your interviews, and then the next section is now hiring.
I don't think we talked about interview, did we?
Interviewing is more like, again, identifying or really discovering what your passion is.
Yeah.
Like, there's
Because that's hard too.
it's
I told
extremely
my
difficult.
my ex-wife and I had a conversation one time, and I said, when people ask me what do I like, I don't know what to say.
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
I have an idea of some things that I might like, but like I don't know what Cam likes to do
Right.
for fun.
Mhm.
Yeah. So in that particular section, I think the biggest tool that I provided was a passion tool, which would help people identify. And it was like, you have these non-negotiable things that you have to do: breathing, eating, sleeping.
Mhm.
You
Like,
got to have a passion for those things.
yeah, those are not negotiable.
Yeah.
You cannot do them, but eventually you are not going to be here,
Right.
right? So there's that. But then the next thing after that is for us, especially like as fathers and husbands, the next thing is our duties. Like, what is our role? What are we responsible for? And the way I would classify duties were things that if they don't get done, either I would suffer or people that I love and care about would suffer.
Yep.
These are duties. These are things that we cannot do them,
Mhm.
but somebody's going to suffer if we don't
Right.
do them.
For sure.
Right. And so from there, moving from duties, then I moved to actual, like, asking a question about passions. Like, is this something that, and the way I describe passion is through fulfillment. Like, fulfillment is this very complex emotion. It can bring happiness, it can bring joy, it can alleviate stress. It brings all these different emotions into one complex emotion of fulfillment.
Mhm.
And understanding that if I am doing something that fulfills me, it's like eating a steak, right, at a steakhouse, and I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I feel great.
I
I had a
love steak.
good steak. I'm fulfilled, which means I'm content and I'm not seeking additional.
Mhm.
That is where I'm operating in the space that I'm passionate in, because I'm fulfilled by the activity of helping people.
Right.
I'm fulfilled by that. And so when somebody comes to me and they have a problem and they're like, hey, can I get your input on this? Or can you help me work through a solution?
Yeah.
And I work through that solution with them, and I'm like, I think this is it. And then to be able to see the outcome
Yeah.
of that solution
Mhm.
3 years, 4 years, 8 years later, it's like I have a friend who literally owed probably like $20,000 in retail credit card debt.
Yep.
And now to see the pendulum swing from $20,000 in retail credit card debt to $20,000 in their bank account, right? That's a huge swing. And they're like, had you not sat with me in Excel,
Yeah.
had you not sat with me and really showed me how to budget and showed me how to pay off these cards
Mhm.
with a rolling payoff plan,
Mhm.
because we are told, oh, highest interest rate, pay that off 1st. Well, if your highest interest rate is on $100,
Yeah.
but you have $100,000 at 3%, you need to be paying off that $100,000.
Right.
That $100, you can get to that last.
Yeah.
And so being able to see that in people would fulfill me. And that tool allows me to say, okay, after I identify that something's fulfilling and it's a passion, is it a long-term passion or is it a short-term passion?
Yeah.
So, for instance, when I was younger, I played the piano. I played it by ear, played tons of songs, could hear a song and play a song by piano on the
Damn.
piano, right? I don't do that anymore as an adult. That was a short-term passion for me. I enjoyed the challenge. It was almost like a Rubik's Cube of,
Yeah.
oh, this is what I hear. This is where that falls on the keys. but it was just a short-term passion for me.
sure.
I like to play the piano now. It's not that I don't like to play the piano, but I'm not as passionate as I was about it at that time. Whereas helping people and being compassionate, that is a long-term passion for me, because I was the kid on the playground who, if somebody was being bullied, I'd be like, come over here and bully me. Leave them alone.
Yeah.
Come over here and bully me.
Come get some.
Yeah, see what happens. See how both of our lives changed today. And so
There's a revolution happening.
that's who I was as a child, but I'm still that person as an adult. Even I remember one time I was on a date walking around the Capitol, and this girl and I were walking, and you just hear this shouting, da, 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 boom. And then I look, and there's two guys, and they're kind of like squaring up to fight. And the first guy hits this guy, and he falls to the ground. He's unconscious.
Oh, damn.
And the guy gets on top of him and just punching him
Oh,
in the face. And I'm like, hey,
he's already down, bro.
yo, like,
Yeah.
and here's the thing. There's still some hood in me, because I'm like, I go up and I'm like, hey, look, you tell me he did something to your daughter or your child or your family.
We can. I will walk away.
I'm walking away. That's on him. He should have thought whose family he was messing with,
For
right?
sure.
But if this is over like a girl or something like that, like he's down, he's out. And the guy kind of bulked up at me like, it's none of your concern. Don't worry about it. And in my head, the hood, you know those Frosted Mini Wheat commercials. The hood in me said, just because you won one fight, don't mean you can win every fight, my man.
sure.
But part of me, but the compassionate person in me says, hey, look, I want you to understand that if you were unconscious, either way, I'd still be over here.
Yeah.
Because right is right and wrong is wrong.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to get your identity, have a description of you. I'm leaving as soon as the ambulance gets here for this guy.
For sure.
I'm out.
Yeah.
But
You're teetering on attempted murder right now.
right.
Just want to know if you know
Just
that.
so you know, I may not tell them who you are, but they will find you.
Manslaughter kind of a thing.
Have you seen the movie Taken?
Yeah.
So
Just saying.
it's that, to me, tells me that my compassion for people from being a child to present is this long-term passion that I actually have. And that long-term passions, those long-term passions, as we interact with them more and more, we become more concise and more, we gain more expertise in those passions. And then there's the things, like you said, the things that you like to do, right?
Mhm.
If it's a thing that you enjoy, but you are not fulfilled by it, I'm not fulfilled by Instagram in any shape or form.
Yeah.
It does not fulfill my life. And so it falls into a distraction category, or really more like a hobby category,
Oh,
because there's hobbies and then there's distractions.
And there's
Hobbies. The hobbies are the Instagram scrolling, right? That's just a hobby that I'm doing because I maybe want to see memes, or I might want to watch videos or reels or whatever it may be. But then there's the distraction aspect when you're doing things that you don't even really like to do.
Mhm.
Like, think about, sugar, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm big on sugar, but I don't do it that much anymore.
Yeah.
But sugar, when you're eating the sugar, you know that the sugar is inevitably, too much of it is bad for you.
For sure.
Right. And so you're not doing it because, oh, well, I like to do bad things for me.
Or maybe I do.
Well, if that's what you do, you got a whole other set. But you're doing it because you're like, this is a habit that maybe sedated a childhood trauma, or
Yeah.
helps me with my emotional management. And because I'm not using the actual solution, I'm using this coping mechanism that is inevitably being heavily relied on, and it becomes eventually a distraction or a detriment
Yeah.
to not only ourselves, but to our passion, to the things that we like.
Mhm.
Because for me, like right now, I got diagnosed with diabetes because too much sugar, right?
Yeah.
And so you think about all the things that, like, let's say I'm at a birthday party, or my wife's birthday is taking place, and she's like, I want to get a cake. I'm like, I can have a bite of that cake, but I can't have
I can't have a
a
whole-
slice of that cake with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it now costs me the ability to celebrate with my wife in a space that would typically be a space that I'd be able to occupy with her.
Yeah.
So that's the second section. Last section is really just about hiring things that are going to support and propel your passion. And I never want to give away the end of the book because it's a pretty big ask. that I could tell you this. I'm not asking anybody to quit their job. That's not the ask. But there's a pretty big ask that I ask at the end of the book, and it is for the betterment of each individual who has gotten to that point in the book. And I think that the journey through the book to get them to that point is there's all these things I'm trying to design and set up for them to see when they get to this decision that they need to make, what's the best way to make that decision and how they're going to actually implement that decision. Because, you know, we can think about the decision all day long, but until you implement it, you're not doing anything.
Yeah. So I have a question. Did you bring us copies of the book that are signed?
You don't have copies of the
I
book?
don't have a book.
I'll get them to you.
I have a copy.
He has
of
a
it.
I was
On my
like,
bookshelf.
I'll get you a
See
copy
how
of the
he
book.
did me? See how he did me?
I literally, so let me tell you
I got it
this.
before y'all knew each other.
I just bought a brand new travel backpack, right? And
Hold up. Your brother brought Brooks.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing. I was like, I need to pack some books. And as I'm packing this bag, I'm like, I only have space for a book. Like I had space for 2 books. I had a space for the book that I'm presently reading, right? And then I had 1 book. And I gave that book to a friend last night.
Gotcha. What's the book that you're reading right now?
It's called The Man the Moment Demands.
The
The
man,
man,
the
the
moment
moments.
demands.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the book I'm reading right now. Don't ask me the author's name. I
Oh, well.
know his face.
I'm not
but
good with
They can
authors
Google it.
either. I was thinking about that. Like, I was like, oh, I've been reading all these books.
written by.
I could tell you 2 names actually. Yep.
Yeah, but that's the book I'm reading right now. So I'll get you a book as soon as I get back to Utah.
Has to be signed though.
Has
I'm
to
gonna
be-
I'm gonna
yeah.
mail my book
I want it
back
signed.
so you can mail
Back
it
to
back
the-
signed.
To the TA.
Yeah.
Once I get back to the TA.
Yeah. So G always asks a question as we wrap up, which I know you know what it is. So hopefully you
Oh yeah,
prepared.
Billy's our supporter.
If you don't remember what it is, it's gonna be fun.
I remember.
I'm gonna ask you before I do. I'm gonna go back to your bio real quick. Last paragraph. It says Billy believes our mental and emotional disciplines are at the forefront of our triumphs. His struggles with emotional intelligence during adolescence drove his desire to develop better tools to share with his audience. Once Billy realized that the application of knowledge was best conveyed in the form of stories, he created the First Row as a platform which his and the stories of others could be shared. Could you talk a little bit about why you believe emotional intelligence is important and your First Row platform?
Sure. The emotional intelligence part is we are 100% emotional creatures. And I can say that because I'm a very logical person. My profession is analytics, which is logic, right?
Hella logic.
But even in analytics, as analytical as I am, if I'm not regulated emotionally, my emotions can supersede my logic. And that's why I always say we're 100% emotional creatures. Like you got to think about, you know, a person being willing to jump in front of a bullet knowing that it could end their life. That's an emotional decision. It's not a logical decision. Logically, self-preservation says
Correct.
the logical decision.
Facts.
But if my child or a child is in danger and I'm like, look, I lived 44 years, I'll take the bullet and they can continue on. That's an emotional decision. And so a lot of the things that we do in life, we don't always associate them to emotions. Whether it be, you know, you're in an argument with your spouse or you're in an argument with your boss, doesn't matter. You're in an argument. Sometimes you might have identified, oh, wait, logically, you know what, logically, their stance on this argument makes sense.
Yeah.
Emotionally, it's hard to let that go because emotionally, nobody wants to feel rejected. And specifically, nobody wants to feel rejected by themselves. So if I give up on my argument stance, now I've basically caved to the fact that this person was right. And if they're right, I am wrong. And being wrong means I have to reject what I initially thought. And what I'm learning, and it's a forever process, but what I'm learning is in those moments where my perception or my emotions may have gotten the best of me, I have to accept that that was me in an emotional state. I just had this conversation with my wife earlier this week where I had felt emotional about something. and that emotion that I had felt made me sensitive. So when she left the house, I was like, she just left without saying bye. Right. And so later on, when we're talking about it, I'm still in that energy of, oh, we just leave this place without saying bye to
I'll
each other.
give
That's
my-
what we do.
Give my
Right.
kisses.
Right. But my wife was like, no, you had came in the bathroom and you gave me 3 kisses. So I didn't feel the need to say goodbye to you. I just left to work. And so in that, where I have this voice in my head saying, fight for your stance, like final
I
round.
wanted 4 kisses.
I have this voice that's telling me this, but I have to move emotionally to, Billy, you were sensitive in that moment. And that's why you felt the way you felt, and you received this experience, this event. You received it as something that it wasn't. And once you identify that emotion, now your logic can come in and say, hey, that event that you thought was this wasn't this. You need to let go of the emotions that are tied to what you thought it was and tie your new emotions to what it actually was. Your wife was just leaving to work.
Right.
See how that, like, that's that emotional intelligence component that really helps people move through that. And then with the first row, that's what the first row is about, like being transparent, being like, yo, me and my wife had this disagreement, and it turns out I was emotional and I was compromised, and that skewed my logic on that experience. Having the first row allows people to share those types of stories that they have. And I started with me sharing my stories because somebody has to be the first one to present vulnerability, right?
For sure.
And I can't be like, hey, come on my show and tell us all your things that you're vulnerable about. I don't talk about my stuff, but you,
I wanna
you
hear
got
all
your
of it.
stuff. You share your stuff. So by creating the first row, it created a space to where not only could we have these types of conversations, whether it be the men's circle, whether it be financial matters, whether it be first row, Wednesday word, or intersations, whatever it was, we could have these conversations through the lens of the public eye,
Right.
but still have that inner dialogue or interconnectivity with each other that allowed us to be in a vulnerable space with each other. And I think that honestly, as I watch content sometimes on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, I'm like, you're lying. People can tell when you're lying. And they, oh, well, this is the way you should approach it, and this is how you should do it. I'm like, you're lying. And I'm not going to bring up this person's name, but there was a guy that my wife used to follow religiously. And I was like, she was like, what do you think about that? I think he's lying. She was like, what do you mean? I was like, what he's saying is true, but his application of it is a lie. And I said, because here's the thing that I know about whether you're in a relationship and you're the man in the relationship, or you're in the relationship, you're a woman in the relationship, no side is right 100% of the time, and no side is wrong 100% of the time.
Yep.
And so the fact that when he's talking, it's always the man is wrong and the women are right, I said, he's just pandering to the audience that he wants.
Because he knows you're going to share it just like you did.
You're going to share it. You're going to buy merch. You're going
Right.
to do all these
Right.
different things. I said, and so he's not on the up and up. And lo and behold, who knew? It came out that he wasn't on the up and up. And and she was like, how did you know?
Logic.
Because I'm not emotionally attached to
The
this.
data doesn't support it.
So yeah, so that's the first row. That's the emotional intelligence point, and it's an ever growing. First row is ever growing. Moved into consulting with you guys on your other venture for Learning Group, and that's where it's at right now. But I'm constantly looking at how do I continue to evolve first row, right? And I think that part of those stories will be things that will be an important component to the conferences later. Like if I didn't start off with transparent, vulnerable stories, it'll be really difficult to get to the conference portion. So that's why the Legacy Conference was laid out in the way that it was laid out, to create these moments of transparency, create these moments of vulnerability within the men that were at that conference.
You just gave me an idea that we're going to talk about once we start recording. But I do want to say that going back to the emotional intelligence, I feel like that is a topic that that more people need to have, which is why I didn't want to kind of close out the call or this segment without talking about that, because I feel like as leaders, it's very important. As people who have a lot of love and passion for things, it's important. And people within the realm of just life, just going through life, right? That's a topic that needs to be talked about, understood, and implemented.
Yes.
So I wanted to say that. And the other thing I wanted to say regarding your First Row platform is, even having had the opportunity to sit in on sessions, I'm glad that you've created that space for men to be vulnerable with each other, because it's more seats like that, more platforms like that, where we need to have that space to be okay with being vulnerable, and then teaching the next generation of men and women as well about the value and the importance of vulnerability. So with all of that said, my last question: life, love, or leadership? Pick one of those three topics, one of those three words, and share whatever's on your heart.
I'm on leadership right now.
Okay.
And I'm on that for a number of reasons, but as I continue to lean into leadership, I am finding more spaces within myself that I am uncomfortable with. And it is almost like driving through the street on a smooth street and then hitting a pothole. You feel it. And your car feels it. So the leadership aspect, especially in the space of being a husband, being a father, it's a daunting task. And the best way I can communicate it is we were in the mall shopping, my wife and I. And this guy, was like, "Oh, I'm getting married next week. You guys are married. Do you have any advice for me?" And my wife was standing right there next to me. I said, "Yeah, I got some advice for you." I said, "Look, being a husband, you are responsible to lead your family. And being the leader sometimes means you have to be the example, even in the face of somebody not being the example. And it's not necessarily fun. It sometimes sucks, and it sometimes hurts, and it's frustrating and draining. But when the person that you're leading gets their eureka moment, all of that frustration, angst, pain, and sadness, or whatever it may be, it goes to the wayside, because you've actually led instead of tried to manipulate, instead of tried to force, instead of tried to coerce. You led somebody to a space that is healthier for them." And so right now, that's where I'm at, is on leadership, in a space where I'm doing some things that are very uncomfortable and counterintuitive to the little hood boy that I grew up as. They're counterintuitive. But I have faith and believe in the results of that leadership being yielding a harvest that is going to be well worth it.
Cool. Appreciate you sharing, man. I will say, and I'll kind of toss it to Cam to close it out, but it's been a pleasure being introduced to you through my wife, reconnecting with you through social media, and building a partnership with you
Yes, sir.
as well. And I look forward to the many platforms of what First Row looks like in the next 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years. So with that being said,
As you guys know, life, love, and actually, hold on. We didn't ask you, where can people find you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm in Utah now.
thanks for flying out, by the way.
And this is your camera, so tell them where to find you.
Got you. You can find me on Instagram at Instagram/First Row, or at First Row. You can find me on Facebook, Facebook.com/First Row. You can find me on LinkedIn, First Row. And First Row is spelled 1STWROE. You can find me in all those places, or you can always connect with me on the First Row website, firstrow.com.
Yep. Okay, now, like, love, share, subscribe. Tell us what you guys like. Tell us what you don't like. We do it for y'all. That's another great episode, and we will see you guys later.
L3
Peace.
perspective.
Booyah.
Boom.
So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is
I was afraid, I didn't know what to do. A lot of us be coming in it.
And what I'll say was amazing to me was
Season 2. Welcome back to the L3 Perspective. My name is Glenn Davis. As you know, I'm sitting here with my co-host, Cameron Macias.
Coach Cam.
L3 Perspective, as you know, we talk about life, love, leadership.
As we've talked about in the past, like, love, share, subscribe. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Because at the end of the day, we do it for you guys.